Season 1 of this podcast is sponsored by Muslim Marriage Services, also known as MMS. If you are looking for marriage, then join MMS, your trusted platform for finding a life partner within the Muslim community. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to Divorced Muslims, a Second Chance podcast. My name is Muhammad and I am your host. In this episode, we are joined by Brother Shabz. His story is about how family interference impacted his marriage. He also discusses co-parenting as a divorced father. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Shabz. Welcome to the show. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. So my name is Shabz. I reside in the UK, born and bred, and I effectively work in the finance industry.
Wa alaikum assalam. Jazakallah khair for that. Okay, let me ask you, Shabz, do you think divorce is more accepted or has it simply become more common?
I think it's definitely more common in the sense that 1 in 2 people are now getting divorced in the UK, be it Muslim or non-Muslims. But I think in terms of acceptance, I think that's a subjective notion, because it's still one of those topics whereby people are still discriminated against.
So would you say, like, over the years it's become more acceptable to society, or are we still stuck where we were, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago?
I think we've definitely moved on. 30, 40 years ago, if a Muslim brother or sister got divorced, they were basically lynched in their society. It was as if they're the black sheep of the family now. Whereas I think today, a lot of families have been forced to become a bit more compromising on divorce. And I think that's probably because one of their daughters or sons may have previously been divorced. So they've seen it happen more often, which I believe has reduced the impact that used to occur on the person that is basically divorced. I think 10 years ago, the situation was slightly different. People were more inclined to make things work. There was possibly intervention by families to a greater stance, where individuals would either take time out or basically go through their family unit with a view to seeing what could be done. I think today it's become far easier. I think a lot of my Muslim brothers and sisters have forgotten that when you get divorced or you ask for a khullah, for example, there's a set process to go through. And I think people now use the word "I'm divorcing you" off the tip of their tongue without realizing the true implications of being divorced.
Shabz, let's go into your story. How did you come across your ex-partner?
So I came across my ex-partner when I was quite young. I was 23, I believe, 24. I was working in Kingston in London and spending a lot of time in the south of England. So I was actually introduced to my ex-wife through some friends who were at Oxford University. And she was basically on secondment from France at Oxford University as a lecturer. So I basically got to meet her through 2 or 3 friends of mine.
Okay, and how long were you married for?
Best part of 6 years, 7 years.
Okay, and how long ago was your divorce?
So the khullah happened in 2017, 2018 mark.
So it's been what, 6 years?
Thereabouts, yes.
So you got married at the age of 24. Tell us about your early days of marriage and how year 1 was like at the time.
It was good. So I basically got to know my ex-wife for 2-3 months, and then she asked me whether I wanted to speak to her dad, and I knew where that was going, so I agreed. And I met her dad, spoke to him, told him that I want to get married to his daughter, told my parents, and we were married within 3 months or 4 months of parents conversing and speaking to each other. So first year of marriage was basically in 2009 when the global economy was shrinking. So I decided to quit my job and we did a bit of traveling. I started my MBA and she was settling into married life, and took time out of work so that we could spend more time together.
How did the story go from there? So you're young man married, getting to stand up on your 2 feet. You know, you're a year into your marriage, a couple of years into your marriage. Tell us how that time was at the time. I know I'm asking you to go back in time, but how do you recall it? How do you remember it?
I think it was good. Initially, I mean, it's like any marriage. When you get married, you'll have a time when it's good, when it's bad. I think for us, the first 3 years were a breeze. We basically, because of my financial position, we were in a good position that we had no debt, and effectively we were traveling whenever we wanted to go and see her family abroad as well as other countries. And effectively, I was focused on my MBA at that time as well. So essentially, we spent a lot of time together, more than probably most couples do in the earlier years. And then we were blessed with a child. So I had a daughter in 2012. It was good. It was the first 3-4 years were brilliant.
Oh, mashallah. How old were you as a father then when you became a father?
Quite young. So I was 27, 28 at that time.
So you got married at 24. First 3 years, marriage was going really well. You even became a father, in this process. Do you remember that feeling when you became a father? Do you recall that moment?
It's one of those things that you never expect. When your child is born, yes, you know your wife's pregnant for 9 months, and you go through all the phases of pregnancy together. But I think when your child is born, especially if you're a father to a daughter like I am, you've got that bond which I can't explain it to you, but it's very much the fact that you're an entity now. You've got someone there, and I openly and wholeheartedly, considering she's a lot older now, believe that the love that you get from a daughter you probably wouldn't from a son. So it was brilliant, and mashallah, I had a brilliant time experiencing parenthood through my daughter.
SubhanAllah. Okay. So I guess the next question is that so your marriage is going well, you become a father to a daughter, which of course is a blessing from Allah. I guess the second half of your marriage, talk us through that. What happens and how does the story pan out?
There was a lot of changes coming in towards the second part. And one of the key changes was that I basically went back into being a partner in a firm. So essentially, I had a lot of workload, and I guess my time at home was split now. And then my brother got married, and there was some family issues going on, which I got dragged into, and my partner got dragged into them from my brother's wife's side. So it started to get things, it started to cause dents. Initially, we let it, not cause issues, but then my partner had to effectively leave the UK because of her job. So she had to start working abroad, and then the distance, etc., started taking a toll. And I guess, being brutally honest with you, when you're quite young, you're more hot-headed, and we both were like that. So at that time, I'd say both of us had quite a fiery personality, just because of the way we were. And essentially, we were very spontaneous as well. So I think the factors that were going on, the fact that we were not together as much, and then the fact that I was working in a very demanding job, and then I started getting ill as well, had an impact on our relationship at that time.
You talked about family. I don't know if you meant family interference or family some kind of involvement. What do you mean by that?
When my brother got married, he had an arranged marriage, and his so basically, being brutally honest, his view was that he wants to live with my mum and dad. He effectively was living with my mum and dad in a quite a large Victorian detached property. So there was more than enough space for privacy, etc. But I think his wife from day one had different agendas, and that started causing issues as soon as they got married. So effectively, the issues it was causing was dragging me into it, and I didn't want to be dragged in. And in the end, within a month or within a few months, I said to my brother, "Look, there's the deposit, and essentially you've got it in your bank. I think you should move out now rather than carry on." But I think that the problem is that my partner wasn't Asian, so she never understood the cultural side of things, or what happens in South Asian culture, because she's an Arab. So effectively, that caused issues in itself. And then with time and other things that were occurring, and the distance caused major issues. So I don't think either one of us were at fault for the divorce. I think if times were different, and if it was now when we're much more older and maturer, probably we would still be together.
Let me go back a bit. One thing I didn't ask was how, when you got married at 24, how old was your ex-partner at the time?
She was a few months older than me, but similar age to me.
Okay. You said that your brother got married and his wife came into the equation. Am I correct in understanding that you guys would have been living in under one roof?
No. So I always lived out because of university, and then the fact that I was working in London a fair bit. I had my own house anyhow. So when I got married, I wasn't living with my parents. I'm the oldest child. So being the oldest, I moved out of the family home, and my other siblings were all married at that stage. Sorry, my sister was married, but she was living in her own house anyhow. But my other siblings were unmarried, so they stayed in the family home.
Okay, so how then did, when your sister-in-law came into living with your parents and obviously your brother, given that you were living independently, how did that cross paths in your marriage?
It naturally does, and the reason why I say that is because you're still although you're not in the same house, you'd visit 2-3 times a week, and effectively there's certain things that I was seeing which I wasn't impressed by, and those things were things like my brother's wife's attitude, etc., and a few other things I'd rather not mention on here. So for that reason, I was already of the view that this is going to cause issues at some point. And it was at the stage where I believe when she became pregnant, I said to my brother, "Look, to avoid you getting divorced, now I think I need to say to you to move out, because it's getting to the stage where you guys are arguing every couple of days because of the same issue. So just move out, because it's otherwise you're heading for a divorce."
Okay, but that focuses on a separate couple, not yours. Now, I appreciate that you said that you guys were going in and out of the house quite regularly, but the fact that you guys were not living together, how did that relationship affect your relationship? If that question makes sense.
No, it does. The way it affected it was because my ex-missus was quite good friends with my brother's wife. So basically she was siding that way, and I'm quite blunt as a person, so I was saying it as it is. I was basically trying to make sure my brother doesn't do something stupid, but at the same time trying to not manage the situation, but being the older one, just put some perspective to it. And I think, I'll give you a crude example to explain it. So I can't remember which birthday it was, but it was one of my daughter's birthdays. And I said to my brother, "Can you please tell your wife not to turn up at our houses?" Because we were trying to sort things out in terms of our issues. I came home and his wife was already at my house. So she clearly knew me and her had issues. And I'd basically said to my brother that I want to resolve my issues, but I can't when I just see this meddling going on. So can you please make sure that she's not there? So that's one example of, when they say a third person comes into your marriage and it splits you. That's basically what was happening.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, another question I have for you is, you said that your ex-partner had to move out of the country. Is that correct? To for
Yes.
work purposes. And at this point, you guys were parents as well. How did that work in relation to your child?
Her contracted hours are only 20 hours a week abroad. And that's full time at that time, I believe it was. So in terms of my child, because we were already used to traveling a fair bit, my daughter was put into primary school there at that age, as the education's far better. And because of my job, I can move around and take a role anywhere. At some point, there was ideology about, are we going to stay in the UK? Are we going to stay abroad? If so, where? So as a couple, we were fairly open about it. And in reality, I didn't want to destroy her career because she's a fairly successful person now, and she was then. I made the right call by saying to her, I think you need to move, but my daughter still needs you. So for that reason, effectively, it was in the best interest of my daughter to stay with her mum, but I was actively visiting. So I would turn up whenever I wanted to turn up and see my daughter. So that was never an issue.
You mentioned that you and your ex-missus, of course, came from a different culture. So here we have a South Asian culture versus the Arab culture. How much do you think that played a part in the marriage not working out?
To be honest with you, the difference in culture probably brought us together more than anything else. As even at that young age, we both saw the frustrations in finding a partner within our own cultures. And effectively, I'd seen that at first light. So I was of the opinion that if I meet someone who's decent but is Muslim, that was my only criteria at that time.
I want to fast forward from like you're going towards the second half of your marriage now towards the end of it. I mean, what happened at the towards the end? What was the root cause, or how would you describe the ending of your marriage?
I think the ending was basically the fact that we both were being stubborn over certain things, and effectively she was already living in abroad, and I was in the UK, and I received a letter from the Sharia court stating that they've had this request. So I think it'd been brought up on a phone call 3-4 weeks before, which, as I said, when we were younger, we were a bit hot headed and we said things on the phone. So I looked at that, and essentially what she didn't know at that time was that I was getting very, very ill. Because we were in a different environment, I didn't want to worry her or use that as a reason for, emotively blackmailing her effectively by telling her that I was getting seriously ill. But I made sure that the Sharia court knew about it. But being brutally honest, I think it's just the name Sharia that counts towards this said court, because they didn't follow any of the procedure. They said to me, why aren't you divorcing her? As in, why would he not give her the 3 divorces? And my answer was, because we have a child, and if she wants to get together with me in the future, once those 3 divorces I've given her, it can't happen. So that's the key reason. And also because I want that family intervention where we get to talk through as a family. And then as a last resort, if it does not work out, we'll come back to you guys. So they gave me a week when her dad was in a foreign country, and he wasn't returning for 3 to 4 months. So essentially, that's basically what happened.
So it sounds like you didn't want to divorce.
I wanted things to slow down so that we both get time to think about it and make a rational decision rather than rushing into it. But I think, the fact that I got a certificate within 8 to 10 days of that said meeting with that Sharia council. It just goes to show how quickly it moved. And they kept telling her, because she told me this afterwards, within that meeting, they kept saying to her that, oh, he doesn't have the balls to divorce you. But they kept telling me other things. So I think there's an element of how, how ethical or how inclined to Islamic jurisprudence that Sharia court was. And in my opinion, they were not very inclined.
Understood. If I was to look at it from the other end of the spectrum, and I appreciate that you can't answer for someone else, but I'm still going to ask you the question. What do you think your ex-partner would say if she was asked the question, why did the marriage end in summary? What do you think she would say?
I think she'd probably say that I was too focused on what I was doing in other areas. I was probably too involved with my family, and the fact that I should have chosen her and my daughter when it came to it. I think that's what she probably would say.
Do you think you made any mistakes in your marriage looking back at it now?
Yes, of course I did. What I would say is everyone does. My key mistakes were that I didn't realize the implications of omitted actions. I never realized that when you're married, it's not just the love and the affection and the loyalty that's enough. It isn't. There's far more that it takes to have a successful marriage. And I think, personally, going back, I probably should have fought more. And I guess what I mean by that is, coming from a legal, financial background, I should have just sued that Sharia element. I honestly think now I left it too late, but I wasn't in the right frame of mind at that time, purely because of the medical issues, where I was misdiagnosed and given the wrong meds. But in essence, if I had to go back, then I would have changed a fair few things.
One really important factor in all of this that is inside of this pot, and we haven't spoken about yet, is your daughter, of course. So when you are getting divorced from your partner at the time, what are the discussions around what is going to happen with your daughter and your relationship with your daughter in terms of both of you?
When it came to my daughter, we were both acting in her best interests. And what I mean by that is, if I really wanted to, there is no way she could have left England with my daughter. As in legally, she could not have done so without a major legal battle. I did not do that. I felt that was wrong. And I knew what was in the best interest of my daughter. And being brutally honest with you, I'm very, very close to my daughter now. So the only real communication I have with my ex-wife is about my child. And we're both very much focused on my daughter. So if there is an issue, we will converse, we will talk about it, and we'll make a joint decision in terms of what affects her and her upbringing.
Here's another question for you. You receive a letter in the post, which you may or may not have been expecting, about getting eventually a khula done, etc. Obviously, the Sharia court communicates with you, and eventually you end up getting divorced. At the same time, your daughter, you decide, obviously mutually, that she is going to be residing with your ex-partner in a different country. So here you are, being happily married a few years ago, to then being divorced and your child living in another nation. Tell me about your feeling at this point, and what did that mean to you at the time?
It leaves you isolated when you're in that situation, because you're conflicted in terms of what to do. Now, with me, I'm not a resentful type of person. And essentially, my key decision was, what is in the best interests of my daughter and my ex-wife? So essentially, the decision that I made was not to separate them, not to do any issues that would cause them damage, but to make sure they were together. And yes, she was in another country, but again, I already knew that it's easier for my ex going forwards if she is there, because she's got family backup. Now, she's still close to some of my family members, because she was here for several years. And same with me. I don't speak very often, but if there's a death in the family, they'll get a text message, etc., from me. So from that angle, I think we had it far easier than a lot of people that I know divorced, where they have custody battles and then they have divorce battles and then other battles. For us, it was that wasn't an issue. The only issue that we had was through the Islamic version, which was the Sharia court, and everything else was more or less settled. She didn't want to take me to the cleaners. Fine, which is why I say she's a really good woman. And I didn't do the same with her. So we kept it very clear and very transparent between ourselves in terms of how we deal with things.
Season 1 of this podcast is sponsored by Muslim Marriage Services, also known as MMS. If you are looking for marriage, then join MMS, your trusted platform for finding a life partner within the Muslim community. What makes MMS unique? They are not just a matrimony platform. They are proud to be recognized as the world's only certified social enterprise Muslim matrimonial brand. This means that 50% of their profits are reinvested or donated to make a positive social impact. As you explore their features focused on digital security and compatibility, know that your journey with MMS contributes to something beyond matrimony. For further details, please visit www.muslimmarriage.global. Has your daughter ever asked you, Dad, why don't you live with us? What happened? Have you ever faced those questions? She's about 12 now, right?
Yeah, when she was younger, I stayed single for 3 years after everything happened. So we were in that separation period. Purely the reason being because I did not want it to impact my daughter's life. And I'm glad I did that because it meant that there was no impact on her. Well, there was no real impact on her childhood at that time. And I'm still close to my daughter. And effectively now, she's the one who says to me that, Dad, you need to get on with things. You're getting older and I want to have a brother or sister. So emotively, she's blackmailing me now to move on with my life.
It's good to have that family support, my friend. Okay, so let's go forward now. Let's fast forward. Your divorce is now behind you. As you said, it's been 6 years since you've been divorced. I want to focus now on your marriage search as a divorcee. When did you start looking for marriage again?
Probably around 2020 mark.
Okay, so about 3 years after your divorce, something like that?
Yeah, thereabouts, yes.
Okay, so 2020, so it's been 4 years, in your search for marriage, put on and off. What's your marriage search been like as a divorcee?
The honest answer is that I think it's difficult as a divorcee, and it comes with many frustrations, especially if you're looking to marry a Muslim woman of a certain heritage. What I mean by that is that, in my opinion, this is my humble opinion. If you're looking for a Muslim woman, fine. That's my number one list item, is that she has to be Muslim, whoever I get married to. But then if you're looking within the South Asian culture, it comes with what you were talking about at the start of this call, which is, the stigma element of being divorced, and having to explain to people why things happened and why you got divorced. You come across many intrusive questions, and it's not just from the lady that you might meet on, one of the WhatsApp pages or from one of the forums or from Instagram. The most controversial questions are from their mothers when they ring you. And sometimes, being brutally honest with you, it puts me off being with a Muslim woman, because some of the questions they get to, you just wouldn't ask that from a non-mahram man who's basically who you'd have no clue about, but you're getting very, very intrusive, to the borderline behavior which is not warranted.
Can you think of any examples of of questions that you faced in terms of the intrusive ones?
So a few years ago, I think it was about 2 years ago now, somebody approached me off one of these WhatsApp groups, as a friend of mine had put my profile up with my consent on one of the pages, and my profile was on there. And because she's a lady, my friend, she's 55, she'd put it on, and I said to her that, look, if you talk to these individuals first, because it seems more respectful than me putting myself down, and then we'll go from there, because she's a family friend, she knows us very well anyhow. So effectively, she introduced me to a family up in Glasgow way. I spoke to the lady 2-3 times. We seemed to get on. There was synergy on several factors that we had. So the first time I spoke to the mum, she started off politely talking about my career, the degrees, whatever. Then we went on to the financial side of things. She wanted to know my net worth, what I paid towards my daughter, what my plans are going forward, whether I'm going to look after my parents or not in the future, what my obligations are towards my family and my ex and my daughter, which I've just cited to, as well as then moving on to me and asking me whether I was cheating on my ex, beating her up, whether there was any issues in the bedroom department, etc. So as you can see, it was getting to the stage where it was quite uncomfortable as a man speaking to someone who you think is an auntie, like a mother type figure, looking for a daughter, when she's coming out with, some very personal and intrusive questions.
Wow. I don't know how you dealt with that, my friend.
I was polite, but I did say to the girl afterwards, as I did have a number, I just messaged her to say, I'm really sorry, but I think our family setup is very incompatible. Some of the questions your mum came out with, and I told her, I just said to her, just prep your mum before she talks to a guy, because someone like me is not going to take that. I was very polite on the phone, but, inside, if it was a bloke, the answers would have been very different, and I probably would have hung up. But because it was an auntie, I just took it and answered as honestly as I could. But at the same time, I was mindful that I don't know this woman from anywhere, and she's asking me questions that could be leaked to anyone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, of course. Do you feel being divorced has impacted your search for marriage?
I think it has. I think because of my age at the moment, it is having an impact. And what I mean by that is when you're below the 40 mark, or just under, in my case, effectively, there's many girls out there that are single, not married. They're usually looking for a guy who is single, not married. And that's where it's impacted me.
Do you have any experiences or an experience that you want to share? I know you've shared one already, but in your search for marriage, you can recall off the top of your head.
Yeah, I can give you two very brief ones. So when I first started looking initially, I thought, forget love marriage, just speak to someone, arranged, and get on with it. And I put my profile up, and somebody approached me from London, and it was a girl who had been living in England for 7-8 years, moved because of a job. And to be fair with you, because she's the first person I spoke to, I guess I got emotionally invested very quickly. And we kept it halal because I only met her twice, but I was missing the warning signs. And I'd known her, I'd been speaking to her for maybe 9-10 months at this stage. And it was getting to the stage where she told her mum about me, but then my daughter came over to England, and she would have been 7, I think, from memory at that age, 7-ish. So all of a sudden, I'm getting irritable messages from her telling me, you're not giving me enough time, what you're doing, your daughter's here, and now she's more important than me, etc. So I spoke to her mum because we had already started talking, and I was very open with her mum. And her mum actually said to me that my daughter's not right for you, because if she's having issues now, imagine what happened when you're married. Basically spoke to her daughter and I told her, look, I'm really sorry, but child comes first beyond anything. And I don't think in your mindset, you're ready for a guy with a child. So I walked away. And then probably something similar happened around COVID, where I was introduced by somebody I used to work with to her best friend. Again, I met the girl I was introduced to with her best friend every single time we met because I was looking to do it the right way. She was giving me the right signs. She saw some of the articles I'd written in the press, etc. So she was telling me, oh, these are signs that we're looking to get together. We're very compatible, etc. But this individual was quite manipulative. And again, I wasted 8-9 months again, purely because my view of the search is when you start talking to someone and you start saying, actually, I'm focused on you, then you stop talking to anybody else. You don't go on, the Instagram lives or anything else. You just stay focused. But this person was, and her friend told me this, was the fact that she basically liked me, but she wanted to keep her options open in case there was anything better coming around her horizons. And it was her friend who actually told me, do you know something? Just move on because you're too good for her.
Wow.
So that's the two slightly different but similar experiences that I've had, where I've had 8 or 9 months wasted at a time.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And what about being, not only are you divorced, you also are a single father. How was that come into play? How does that come into play when you're looking for marriage and when you're discussing this with the potential?
I'm very honest about it. And one of the key differences between me and many single fathers out there in the UK is that my daughter's not with me every weekend. She's here in the holidays, but she doesn't really have a major impact on my life, if that makes sense, on a day-to-day basis. Because she sat in France, we talk every day, we WhatsApp each other, and then I go and see her whenever I want. I'll pick a flight and go and see her. And when she wants to come and see me, she's old enough now to take a child unaccompanied flight. And either my ex or I will book the flights and she's back in the UK for a few days, etc. Purely because she's now at the stage where she's quite ahead in school by 2 years. So she's focused on her studies. So she's not here as often anymore. It's not like I've got a toddler who's 3-4 who needs me for the majority of time. And I think unless you have nieces and nephews who are of that age, or you're a mother yourself as a woman, I think it's quite hard to understand that.
Let me get your viewpoints on a few things. When someone who is divorced is looking for marriage, often what happens is that as soon as they mention that they are divorced, people just close the door on them. I know I've seen this happen. What are your thoughts on why this happens?
It comes down to personal choices as one, but I think that there's also that mindset about why is that person divorced. I know a fair few Muslim sisters that have been divorced through social networks, etc., and you hear about stories in terms of what the guys were like. So I can see why certain sisters close the door on an individual who's divorced as a man, because they start seeing alarm bells in terms of why is he divorced. Nobody really asks you what happened and what was the root cause of your relationship breakdown, etc.
Do you think that a single, never married person looking for marriage compared to somebody who's divorced looking for marriage, do you think one has an edge over the other?
I think they do. I think the person that is single, not married, has an edge up to a certain point. And what I mean by that is that, again, coming back to what I said earlier on about me being just under the 40 mark, at this moment in time, I'm probably competing against guys that have never been married or divorced, because there's many of them out there. But in 4 or 5 years' time, when you hit, you're going towards the mid-40s in terms of age, I think at that time, a divorced individual has got an advantage over the guys that have never been married they've never been married or divorced at that time.
Do you think that there's a stigma attached around being divorced?
I think there's less of a stigma now than it used to be 10 years ago. But I think within the underlying notions, there is a stigma still attached to someone who's divorced. I think it's more of a stigma for our sisters out there rather than for our Muslim brothers who are divorced out there.
Why'd you say that?
It comes down to that notion of, she's no longer virtuous, but people don't realize that she was in a halal relationship and married to an individual, so she's done nothing wrong. But there's still that underlying thick mentality that exists within the Asian culture, which is that she's divorced for a reason, and people will add on their reasons as they see fit.
What advice would you give to divorced people looking for marriage?
I think the first thing that I would say to divorced people looking for marriage is that you need to look at where you went wrong in the past and what could have been done differently. And is there any aspects of your actions that you potentially regret? And how are you going to stop that from happening and causing an effect in the future? Now, in my opinion, in terms of marriage, you've got many avenues open to you in this day and age. You've got, the larger websites like Muzz, which you can swipe all day long if you want to try and find someone. You've got the apps, you've got the WhatsApp groups, etc. But I honestly believe the approach taken by certain Instagram groups where you actually just talk and listen to people, or the WhatsApp groups where you've got the numbers of so-and-so's sister or brother is the best approach, because you find more serious people there. And having looked at this, I just feel people are more open within their character when you're looking at such avenues whereby either where you've heard someone speak before on a forum and you effectively know about the person, rather than just making a decision based on what you've read in their Muzz profile or on a WhatsApp group in their in their profile where it just says they're divorced and nothing else.
I'm going to do what we call a rapid fire round with you now. The rule of the rapid fire round is that you have 3 seconds to answer the question. So I just want you to think about whatever comes in your head, just say it as it is. You ready for this, yeah?
I am, yes.
Okay. Tall girl or extra large girl?
Tall girl.
A girl with a great personality who you don't find attractive, or a girl with an average personality who you find very attractive?
The first one.
Living with family or living independently?
Both.
Looks or character?
Character.
Very attractive girl with mediocre level of deen, or average looking girl with amazing deen?
Both, in my opinion.
Educated girl or very successful girl?
Educated.
One thing you really want, but you could compromise on for the right person?
I normally, when I'm looking at profiles or talking to someone, ideally I want someone maximum with one child. But if I meet someone who, in my opinion, is a brilliant person and someone I want to be with, I think that I couldn't care less anymore.
One regret in life?
Getting to the stage to get divorced.
Biggest achievement to date?
Being a father.
And biggest dream?
Setting up my own consultancy business, retiring at 50, and semi-working and living the life of leisure, traveling the world.
Okay, that's the end of the rapid fire round. Well done there, Shabz. And finally, we're going to do a little profile with you. What's your age?
39.
Your height?
5'9".
Location?
West Yorkshire.
Ethnicity?
Pakistani.
And occupation?
I'm a director in a company.
Okay, and in terms of what you're looking for, what's your age range?
Between 30 and 42, 43-ish.
Height preference.
Between 5 foot and 5'9".
Location preference.
It's open to discussion.
Ethnicity preference.
Arab or South Asian.
And occupation preference.
There's no preference.
If you fit the criteria of the guest today, and if you are interested in considering the guest for marriage, then please email us the following details: your name, age, location, height, occupation, ethnicity, marital status, family contact name, and details. Our email address is divorcedmuslims@gmail.com. Remember the golden rule: only family details will be exchanged. If we have no family details, then the request will be ignored. Well, Shabz, that's the end of the podcast. Or the episode, should I say. So thank you very much for joining the episode, and I hope it's been of some kind of value to yourself.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to reach out to me to do this.
Season 1 of this podcast is sponsored by Muslim Marriage Services, also known as MMS. If you are looking for marriage, then join MMS, your trusted platform for finding a life partner within the Muslim community. What makes MMS unique? They are not just a matrimony platform. They are proud to be recognized as the world's only certified social enterprise Muslim matrimonial brand. This means that 50% of their profits are reinvested or donated to make a positive social impact. As you explore their features focused on digital security and compatibility, know that your journey with MMS contributes to something beyond matrimony. For further details, please visit www.muslimmarriage.global.